Hi everybody. Sorry this video is going to be quite late out today. Um, Still got a cold as you can hear, and I'm still just kind of feeling like really low on sort of oomph and motivation. But that's just part of life. You get colds and sometimes things slow down. But in this video, I thought because I've been getting some really great questions, particularly around kind of studying and study technique and some of the study videos that I've made, um, I thought I'd answer some of those questions. So let's jump straight into these questions. Actually, before that, I suspect the most helpful videos that I'm making are the study-related videos. They seem to get the most views. But if you can leave me a comment and tell me which type of videos do you find most useful on this channel. If they're the study videos, then great. If they're some other videos like my reflections on life, chasing goals, exercise, that kind of stuff, let me know and I'll try and make more of those type of videos. So let's get straight into these study question videos. So the first, study questions. First one, do you think there's a difference on learning by writing on paper or using a computer? Personally, I think that writing on paper is a better way of studying. It's a better way of getting stuff to stick in your brain. And this is because when you're typing out, you're just doing this kind of typing motion. You're not feeling the shape of the words and the shape of the letters, and you're not able to quickly kind of map out in a kind of mind map way to draw a kind of visual representation, a diagram of the information you're trying to learn. You're very much fixed with just typing this stuff out. And writing does actually help to get that information and the shape of the word and the shape of the letters to sink into your brain. So I've always found, both kind of looking at the research and through my experience, that writing helps me to retain information. Drawing out diagrams, scribbling out connections between ideas helps to form those connections in my brain so that I retain that information longer term. On to the next question. Do we need to write out by hand or can we recall mentally? Again, a great question along a similar theme. So this is when you're doing the read and recall method and you read through some information and then you're trying to recall that. If it's a simple thing, you could recall it out loud by explaining it. Particularly, this will be helpful if you have an exam, like an OSCE exam, or a job interview or a presentation where you have to speak the information out loud. It is better to, in that way, recall the information just in your mind or actually speaking it as though you're teaching it or giving the presentation. And but if you want to remember specific words or you've got a written exam or an essay exam, then actually writing it will be more helpful. So when you're recalling things and you're practicing, if you can practice as close to the situation that you want to perform in as possible, that's going to give you the best results. So if you have a OSCE exam, you want to practice in an OSCE scenario. If you've got an interview, you want to practice an interview with somebody. If you've got a presentation, you want to practice actually giving a presentation. If you've got a multiple choice question exam, it's worth practicing multiple choice questions. If you've got an essay exam, practice essays. So whatever type of situation you're preparing for, practice similarly to the situation. When it comes to the read and recall method, you can read the information, cover it up, and then either recall it mentally, that's fine. But if you really want to remember it, I find it helpful to actually write down the information you're trying to remember and do that repeatedly from memory. Next question. What about handling stress and anxiety about time while studying and practicing? This is a great question, and anxiety and stress about time is something I've had for a long time. I've always found that stuff takes way longer than you think it will. It's very difficult to fit everything that you want to do into the time that you have available. And I think the only way to manage this is kind of acceptance that stuff will just take a long time, and it'll probably take longer than you think, and you're going to have to allocate that time to the thing. There is a risk of, if you think that a study session is going to take you 5 hours, one of the problems is that then it becomes this really big thing in your head, so you don't get around to doing it. So while something might take you 5 hours, there's also the risk of putting it off because you see it as being a big thing that's going to take a long time. You're not going to find 5 hours. So you may want to just say, okay, I'm going to sit down and do 20 minutes of this thing. It's probably going to take 5 hours, but I'm going to do 20 minutes. And you'll find that once you get into that 20-minute session, it then becomes an hour or 2 hours, and you've made a big chunk of progress towards that thing. I think giving yourself a break and accepting that everything is going to take longer than you expect, and that is part of the process, is very helpful. And being patient and saying, look, I've got these big goals. I've got this studying that I need to do. I've got all this revision I need to get done. And that's just going to take time. And I'm going to keep working at it. And eventually I will get there. There's always this feeling, especially with this instant gratification world of, you go on your phone and find something out in seconds, that you want to have instant results. You want to kind of sit down, study session, learn everything. It's all done. I can, go on and do something else that I enjoy. But the reality is it will take quite a bit of time, even with the best study methods. Just try to be patient with that and trust the process and keep going, even if you feel like you're kind of not making as much progress or as fast as you want. Trust the process, keep going at it. Eventually you'll get through everything. Next question. Wanted to ask whether you can make a video on studying huge textbooks, in my case Robbins Pathology, and revising them for exams without making notes. This is an excellent question. So you may have watched my study videos and be aware of this external database, internal database strategy that I have, where your external database is like a concise set of notes that you use to transfer information into your brain, which is your internal database. The external database, you want it to be simple, easy to study, and you want it to be there without you having to spend hours and hours and hours creating it. Creating your external database is a waste of time. The problem is if you have this thing like Robbins Pathology, which is a massive, detailed textbook, hard to study, and not really suitable for using as an external database because it's so hard to get through. It's difficult to learn from. What's the solution to having this Robbins Pathology transferred to your external database so that you can put it in your internal database without having to spend hours creating notes? Well, luckily we now have AI and language models which can do this work for you. So you can take anything like lecture slides, Robbins pathology textbooks, really detailed sources of information that are difficult to study from, and you can take a photo of those, or you can make a PDF of those detailed resources, upload them to like ChatGPT or Grok, and say, please make a concise set of notes that are easy to study for, say, a final year medical student on this topic. And what it will do is it will process that complicated information and it will turn it into a nice, easy to study set of notes for you. And you can use that set of notes as your external database. So I need to make a whole video about how to use AI to create your external database so that you can speed up your process of learning, which I will get to at some point. Next question. Could you replace the topics with lecture slides, PowerPoint slides? For example, let's say you are taking physiology as a class and your exam is based on 6 lectures or PowerPoint presentations. Could you apply it this way? Absolutely. So if you have, say, 6 presentations that contain everything you need to know for your exams, you can just use those presentations as a kind of topic to do this testing sandwich with. You might find it helpful to put those presentations into ChatGPT or Grok or another language model, AI model, and ask it to make concise notes for you, because that way they're easier to study than going through a presentation. But yeah, absolutely. So you can do one study session. You would take the PowerPoint slides and just study those for one study session. I would recommend having some kind of short answer questions and multiple choice questions, so you can turn that into a testing sandwich. So each lecture presentation that you need to study, you've got some short answer questions to do first. You kind of do this read and recall for the lecture, and then you have some multiple choice questions to test yourself on afterwards. Next question. Whenever I used to focus on studies or dedicated a slot to just read as much as I can and put all the information into my internal brain from the external database, like books, resources, and notes, I gradually start to get stuck and start to blame that I'm dumb and I feel stupid. It's a good question, and I think this is something a lot of people will struggle with. There's certainly something that I've been frustrated with in the past, where you sit down to study something and you just can't get your head around it. And you start to feel like, I can't understand this. Maybe there's some problem with me. Why is it I can't understand this? And yeah, like you say, start to kind of blame yourself that you're not going to be able to do it. This is a normal part of learning. Part of the problem is that the resources you're using are probably not very good. I've struggled in many times in the past, especially in medical school, with textbooks that were just badly written. I would say they're complicated, but they're unnecessarily complicated, because the information is not that hard. It's the way it's written that makes it more difficult. So that's what Zero to Finals came from. I aim with Zero to Finals to make complex stuff simple so you can study and learn it quickly. But even then, there'll be times where you struggle that first time you go through something to understand it and then to retain it. This is the importance of spaced repetitions. So the first time you go through something, you might find it really complex, difficult to understand, and feel like, you feel stupid, like you just can't understand it. But with repetitions, what you'll probably find is, if you come back to that information in a week's time, in the interim, your subconscious brain has been processing that information. Even though it didn't make sense to you the first time you read it at the time, you'll probably find when you come back to it in a week, everything makes a lot more sense. This happens to me constantly, where I struggle to understand something, I get frustrated, come back to it in a week, and it makes so much more sense. The first time you read it, it may make like 30, 40% sense. A week later, it makes 60, 70, 80% sense. And the next time you study it in another couple of weeks' time, it might make 90 or 100% sense. And you retain it so much better. So the first time you study something, if you're struggling with it, don't worry. Get through it and then come back to it after some time. Next question is this useful for those who have one day from their final exam? So this is about the read and recall technique. I've had a few comments about people saying, how do I study if I've got 24 or 48 hours to my exam? At that point, it's very difficult. I really, really would promote spending time doing spaced repetitions leading up to the exam. The problem, if you leave it to the last minute and try and cram, There's stuff you can do to maximize your chances of success. And what I would suggest doing in that situation is rapid fire testing. So this is where something like the Fact Trainer tool on the Zero to Final site, some people use Anki, some people use flashcards, and some people just use question banks. This is where these are useful in the sort of week or two before your exam to just rapidly try and cram as much information as you can into your memory, hoping that that comes up on the exam. The problem is, with this short notice until your exam, you're never going to score massively high. Rapid testing is the best method for trying to get as much information into your head as quickly as possible shortly before an exam, but you're not going to score really high grades at that point. The best method is to start very early and have a nice spaced repetition routine using all the methods I've talked about, and the testing sandwich and adaptive revision schedule leading up to the exam. So what I would generally say is use this. If you watch my video on the adaptive revision schedule, the idea is to do spaced repetitions of read and recall with testing leading up to the exam. And then in the week or two before the exam, just hammer kind of short answer questions, flashcards, kind of really just hammer key facts into your brain in that last week or two before your exam. Next question is, can we use an iPad for note-taking? This is for the read and recall technique. So when you do the read and recall technique, a big part of it is before you even start studying, you jot down quickly however much you can remember. Then you start reading through, and at each stage of reading through, you're trying to stop, cover everything up, and recall from memory everything about that topic as you can. I think the best way to do this is to scribble things, just scribbling rough hand on a piece of paper, which you then throw away. You can absolutely use an iPad and an Apple Pencil to do the same thing. Just scribble things down and then just delete that note afterwards. That works just as well as paper. An alternative, which I talked about earlier, was you can say things out loud from memory. You can kind of present them. You could use a whiteboard and scribble things on a whiteboard, then wipe it out. You could explain it to, say, a family member or a friend, trying to explain it in your own words. There's lots of things you can do, but I wouldn't suggest typing it into a computer, because typing kind of takes away a little bit of the kind of mind-hand connection or the mind-mouth connection if you're explaining it. And if you're asking specifically about taking notes, I am not a big fan of taking notes. And you can watch my video on note-taking, all about my thoughts on notes. Okay, next question. What is the use of the paper covering other text? Is this to make sure you don't overload yourself with information? So this again with the read and recall technique, when you have the book open, you use the paper to cover the notes and to bring it down. The reason for the paper is to block out information that you're going to try and recall before you study it. So for example, if there's a list like, what is the immediate management of an acute coronary syndrome? If you have that list, if you don't have a paper there, you'll have the list there, so you'll automatically have a quick look, and that will prevent you from being able to recall it completely from memory. So the paper is just there to stop you from having access to the information that you need to recall from memory. So it's just a way of, making you recall stuff without being prompted. You don't have to have the paper there, but it's not so much to stop you getting distracted. It's more so that you don't have access to the answers, and you can force your brain to recall it without having the answers. Okay, next question. Last question, in fact. Hello, Tom. Thanks for your videos. I want to know your thoughts on doing question banks directly for exam prep without doing any reading before. this is a great question, and this is a mistake that I see people make all the time. I help train loads of GPs to pass their applied knowledge test exam, which is a multiple choice question medical exam. And the biggest thing that I see that causes people to fail is that they just do question banks and they don't do sort of reading around the topic. And when I say reading, I mean this read and recall, trying to understand the concepts, getting the bigger picture from reading through the actual topic. I don't necessarily mean just reading loads of books sat in the bath passively. I mean really actively reading stuff, doing the read and recall technique. And people who just rely on question banks, the problem is you just train very key facts without having the bigger picture and the overall understanding of the topic. And I've seen loads of people fail just doing this method. And certainly this is not the way to reach your full potential. In fact, I failed an exam myself. I did a postgraduate exam, the diploma from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. And I failed that exam. And the reason I failed was because I just did the question bank. I was scoring really high on this question bank. It was past medicine. And I thought, I'm going to smash this exam. Went into the exam. And lo and behold, the questions that came up were not the same as the questions on the question bank I used. And I failed by, I think, 1 or 2%. The next time I sat that exam, I went back to the guidelines. I used the external internal database strategy, read and recall. I implemented the strategies I talk about on this channel, and I absolutely smashed the exam. So I would strongly advise against just using question banks, and I would suggest instead to use the testing sandwich technique, meaning short answer questions, read and recall, and then multiple choice questions, and doing that with spaced repetitions using the adaptive revision schedule. I hope that video was helpful. If you have any further questions or you like this format, leave me a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video, which will be tomorrow.